Hey everybody. Okay, so first off, I want to apologize for not uploading a video last week. I got sick, I still sound a little bit funny as you can tell, and it just didn't seem conducive to me being on camera, snotty and such, talking about movies. I didn't think anybody was gonna really be into that. This week we're going to have two videos uploaded this week, the one that you're currently watching, and then on Thursday I'm going to upload the video that was going to go up last week, so keep a lookout for that. If you're not subscribed already, please do. So, this week's video is going to be about the movie Us from Jordan Peele. It's his sophomore directorial effort following up from Get Out, which was wildly successful 2 years ago. It won an Oscar for Best Original Screenplay. It made shit tons of money. It was a huge financial success, critical success. It pervaded pop culture. It was a huge phenomenon. And Us seems to already be well on its way to doing the same. It's outperformed Get Out opening gross-wise. The reviews, however, for the film are slightly more mixed. I'd say slightly, mostly because a lot of critics seem to be in agreement that it's a fantastic film, but the actual exit surveys from people seeing the movie are a little bit more divided, most likely because the ending of the film is more open-ended, whereas Get Out was a very concise, conclusive movie that everyone could kind of agree on. Us seems to be sparking a lot more debate. Before I get into Us, the film itself, I want to talk a little bit about how the film is being consumed and discussed and analyzed, and how I think part of the discourse around Us is indicative of a larger trend in pop culture analysis that drives me absolutely insane. So, obviously, picking apart pieces of art, films, television, music, whatever, that's been around forever. Criticism at its core is taking something down to its most minute pieces and putting it back together and figuring out what it means to you, what the author intended, what the audience is going to think. And the specific trend that I'm talking about, I think, could be traced back to the show Lost. I don't know if you remember the show Lost. It was a huge hit in the mid-2000s for ABC. J.J. Abrams produced the show. Most people now only talk about it as being a television series that had a terrible ending, which I staunchly disagree with. The thing about Lost is that it was a mystery show that also had a diverse cast of characters on emotional journeys. So if you watched Lost and you only cared about the characters and where they were going, you would get one sort of complete experience by watching the characters, seeing what they go through, seeing how they react, and where they end up, if they grow over time and that type of thing. And then also, if you were into Lost, you were probably also into the mystery element of the show, that the show had a ton of weird sort of sci-fi fantasy tropes mixed in with this survival premise, and that the longer you watch the show, the more it seemed like there was just this deep, unending rabbit hole of plot threads and foreshadowing and symbolism and things. So much so that during the show's original broadcast run, Entertainment Weekly writer Jeff Jensen started a weekly column where he would not only review every episode of the show, but he would break down all the different references, all the Easter eggs, all the sort of metatextual influences on the show. If a character was reading a book and he saw what book it was, he would go read it and see if somewhere in there it had clues as to where the show was going, or if someone referenced a Bible quote or anything like that, he would just go pick it all apart and put it back together. And Jensen's columns were amazing to read. If you liked Lost, it added tons of depth and interesting insight, oftentimes more insight than was actually there in the show. Jeff was trying to create a way that people could consume the show on a deeper level, obviously. The writers, I think, were well aware that this is how people were consuming the show, and the longer the show went on, the more they seemed to play to that part of the audience. They would put things in as fun Easter eggs, and people would go pick it apart and go drive themselves insane. And, for the diehards anyway, it gave the show, I think, longer legs than it would have if it had just been a show about these characters on an island. The fact that it was about all these other things, this just big, crazy mixture of all the writers' obsessions. And that's why people continue to rewatch the show every year, multiple times a year in some cases, and it's part of why it was such a big show. The issue with that is it's also why people hate the ending, is that they spent this humongous amount of time tearing things apart, trying to figure out what Lindelof and Cuse were really up to, and then in the end, a lot of that stuff went nowhere. That stuff was left out. But I think that particular type of analysis can really set you up for disappointment, especially with a long-running television series where you're investing like way more time into the show than you would like a movie or a comic or something. You know, it's a lot of physical time that you're spending every week for years in some cases. And if you work yourself up into thinking it's going to be one thing and it's another, you're going to hate it. Lost is not solely responsible for this trend, but I definitely think that's sort of like the tipping point to where this became a big thing. With the attention economy the way things are, it is very difficult to get people to pay attention to your product for long periods of time, right? So if you have a movie and you make a movie that's just pretty good or, you know, has interesting themes or the characters are likable or whatever, that's almost meaningless at this point because another movie just like it will come out in a couple of weeks and people are going to start talking about that instead. And the thing is, you know, if you want people to talk about your thing, if you want people to write think pieces about it, if you want people to have, you know, if you want people on message boards and subreddits and things of that nature to get into the deeper world that you've created, you have to kind of play to that audience. You know what I mean? You have to play to the amateur pop culture detective in all of the viewers. You have to stoke their imagination to want to go and pick it apart and, you know, look at like fan theories and different things, because that is going to keep it alive longer in the national conversation. I think something that really tipped me off to the idea that someone could be doing this purposefully as bait was the Donald Glover Childish Gambino video for This Is America, which came out last year, and people loved this video. I hated this video. I like Donald Glover very much. I like Childish Gambino's music for the most part, but I think the song was just middling. I thought it was fine. I think the video itself is entertaining enough as a 3.5-minute clip, enticing people to read into it and stuff. It's good, you know, for getting conversation going, but I don't think it was deep in that. I think it was just empty calories. I feel like when Donald Glover set out to make the This Is America video, that the key influence there was Drake, because all of Drake's music videos and everything Drake does in public is designed specifically to get people to make fun of him and turn him into memes. Everything that man does, and has done for years. And it works. It's why Drake was so omnipresent up until like a few months ago, you know, that he was this nonstop pop cultural presence because he was always doing things that you could pick apart and put back together, and he made himself larger than he really was by inviting that sort of analysis and criticism. And I think that This Is America video did that on a much more cerebral scale, because instead of just looking to be memed in general and just looking to be picked apart, it really implied that it was deeper than it truly was. Like Drake's Hotline Bling video doesn't pretend like it's anything more than Drake doing funny dances in front of, like, you know, colorscapes. That's all it is. But This Is America really makes you feel like, oh, this might be like a really deep, important message. And if I just watch it enough times, if I just stream it enough times on YouTube and share it to enough of my friends, together we're all going to figure out what that meaning is, and maybe it'll change the world or something. And no, it just made the song get a lot of streams, helped it win a Grammy, 2 Grammys, I think. And yeah, and I mean, I think that was what their goal was. I don't think that they had anything super deep to really say with that video. There's some like really overt stuff in there, and there's ideas and images that, like, you know, stoke people's imagination and stuff. And that's what music videos used to be anyway. It used to just be 3 minutes of crazy shit that you'd play on a loop and tell your friends about. And that's fine. You're marketing a song. You're not actually telling a story necessarily. But the discourse around that video drove me insane at the time, because you couldn't go anywhere on the internet without someone telling you some, like, you know, showing a screenshot of a frame and, oh, this means this and this is what's going on here. And you're just like, I mean, I guess it's just it's a music video. Not even a particularly great one, you know? That's insane. It reminded me of when I was a teenager. I had an English teacher when I was a freshman in high school who was a failed novelist, and anytime she wanted us to analyze short stories or poems or fiction, she would always talk about symbolism and metaphor and allegory in a way that was very limited, I would say. I always felt like she would ask the students, like, what do you think? How did this make you feel? Then you'd tell her, and then she'd go, well, that's wrong. The writer really meant this. And you're just like, why are we even having this discussion then? Like, you know, she always made, to me anyway, she made stories feel like math problems, and that if you solved them, that meant you were smart, and if you didn't, it meant you were dumb. And that's just never been what's appealed to me about stories. Stories are supposed to move you on an emotional level in some way. At least for me, that's what I get out of them. And I think if you're just looking at them I think if you're just looking at them as like puzzles to solve, then like what's the point? They make actual puzzles. That's a real thing. It's like a whole industry. It's one of the reasons why I stopped watching the show Westworld on HBO. Westworld, more so than almost any other television series since, fully embodies what made Lost so popular, in that it's a science fiction series, and there's like a large cast of characters, and there's a lot of, if you're into it, there's emotional things that you can kind of get out of it. But most people really just wanted to have fun picking it apart and going on the subreddit and watching Hack's Dogma theory videos, no shots to Hack's Dogma, and figuring out what's going to happen in next week's episode before it airs. And that's cool. That's fun. It can be really fun. Like, playing along, trying to solve a mystery before the creators do. But with Westworld in particular, I felt as though there wasn't very much deeper than the mystery solving. Especially with the second season. Once the second season started and I realized they were just trying to like really trick all the fans from Reddit and really get them frothing, I realized it just wasn't a show for me anymore. Like, the first season I think is very strong. I like it a lot. It's a pretty good, complete overall story, but I don't need more. I don't need every year for Jonah Nolan and Lisa Joy to just like send me on a scavenger hunt. I don't consume fiction to go on scavenger hunts. That's just not, I don't want to be walking around with a net picking up background gags. It's just not what I enjoy about stories in general. Which brings us back to Us. Comparing it to Jordan Peele's first film, Get Out. Get Out had a lot of Easter eggs and interesting little symbolism and things like that. I tried to find it, but there's a Tumblr post where someone had like compiled every single visual reference in the film and what it meant and the symbolism, all that stuff. And it was a cute little post because it was like, it really reminded me that like Get Out is a very simple film. There's layers to it, and but overall it's a very tightly wound, conclusive piece of work. It's a great cinematic debut, but all the stuff in it that like all the deeper stuff, like it was all very obvious to me, and I think to most people if they were paying attention. It works because everything in Get Out is servicing the same core, really strong premise. It's all like this one basic theme, and then all these other things surrounding it, and it all kind of comes together as like one pleasing, satisfying whole. I only watched Get Out the one time, and I loved it. I had a great experience. I never went back and watched it a second time. All the stuff that was in that post, I caught the first viewing, because it was just so clear. Everything about it was very straightforward, and I had a blast. I thought it was fantastic. It's a dope movie. Us, to me, is very different in that I feel like it's more ambitious. I definitely think that the world itself is larger, the ideas are a little bigger, and I think there's more of them. I think there's a lot more ideas. And at times I think it might be too many ideas. I've actually written a real review of Us, which I put in the description below, so I'm not going to go through beat by beat of the movie or explain every basic thing about it, but the key thing I want to talk about is that I don't know if it works, but I also don't care if it works. By the time you get to the end of Get Out, everyone in the audience has the same reaction to the proceedings. It's one of sort of ecstatic joy. You're very satisfied that the movie is ending on this kind of conclusive note. It's something resembling a happy ending, and it's visceral the way it gets you, like this catharsis. It's kind of like really like incredible. And Us doesn't have that. I'm going to get into it in a few minutes because it's heavy spoilers, and I want to keep that in part of the video. People can ignore if they need to. But I watched Us twice. Once at a press screening, and then I wrote my review for it, which is below. And then I saw it again Friday morning with my girlfriend. And I had largely the same feelings about the movie afterwards. Then, later on that night, I read sort of a spoiler post-analysis of the movie on the site Shadow and Act, which I've also linked below. And it was only at that moment in reading the analysis that I realized I had read a very key piece of the ending completely wrong twice. Twice in a row, I watched this movie, and with no outside interference and no active participation, creativity on my part, just got a very different ending than everyone else did. And I'm not saying that because I think it makes me super smart that I came up with a cool ending no one else did. I didn't do it on purpose. I wasn't seeking out to create my own little unicorn version of the story. It's just how I read things, and I've felt really weird about it ever since. So later on, I'm going to talk about what I thought the ending of Us was and how I'm wrong and what that means. The thing is, overall, I really liked Us. I think Lupita Nyong'o's performance is incredible. It's like the best performance she's basically ever given on screen. I think the whole cast works really well together. I think it's well shot. I think it's mostly well edited. I think the scare sequences are pretty good. I think watching it with a really rowdy audience makes it not a particularly scary horror film, because a lot of the laughter in the film tends to linger into the actual scares. At least the first time I saw it, a lot of the, like, the more suspenseful bits felt kind of stepped on because people were just like so hype and into it. So for me, the movie was never quite scary. I feel like the entire first half of the movie, you know, is functional. It's exciting. It's cool. It's paying off the premise that you see in the trailers. But I felt like it was just kind of whatever. I felt like this is cool. It just feels like a pretty well-made horror movie, and I was into that. And I liked that Jordan was doing something like this for his follow-up. But to me, I didn't really care about the movie until the actual final act. All the revelations and the way this world just gets expanded in this really cool science fiction kind of way, that was the stuff I liked the most, because it made me think. I kind of like when people answer questions in a story with something that just leads to more questions. Not just a definitive yes or no, this is what happened. I thought it was really cool that it hinted at this larger world that didn't quite necessarily make sense on a purely logical standpoint. Like, I'm pretty sure by now the CinemaSins guys have already picked it to bits. Fuck that. I don't really care about plot holes and internal logic quite as much as certain people do. But I do think that what made the film so special to me was that having all those things together, having these crazy concepts, really let me know that the world was bigger than it was, and it felt kind of more special than if it had just been like an extended home invasion thriller with a really basic one-to-one metaphor of like us being our own enemies and having to fight yourself and stuff. Like, that would have gotten really played out. But the fact that it hinted towards larger ideas, I thought was really cool. And the way I read it initially was, it felt to me like Jordan was having a little bit of fun with the way people picked apart Get Out. To me, anyway, I thought that this was supposed to be sort of like a big fun romp, because the movie is just fun. I thought it has so much so much vitality and stuff, and that all of the symbols and other ideas and stuff in the background are also there, like, for fun. You know what I mean? Like, it's extra credit. Like, you know, you pick that stuff apart. You know, it's something to play with. It's something to help the movie, you know, stay alive in the larger consciousness of the public and stuff. And it's neat. But I figured that it wasn't, like, super important, you know what I mean? Like, K. Austin Collins has a really fantastic review of Us in Vanity Fair that I've also linked below. But when he first watched the movie, he went on Twitter and he said, you know, it's really fun, just don't overthink it. And that's how I felt. I felt like, I don't need to overthink this movie. I enjoyed it on a purely visceral level. I like the ideas that were hinted at. I think that's really cool. It doesn't fully quite come together, but I don't really need it to either. I think that alone is enough. It makes it exciting. You know, I'm not into that whole elevated horror thing that people keep talking about, like the idea that you can only like horror movies when they're like made for hipsters and A24 produces them. You know, I think that's stupid. I think most really good horror movies are the ones that are just what other people would consider to be dumb horror movies, because the minute a horror movie is trying to let me know that it's special and different than the other ones, I just tune out. I just don't care. But that's how I felt. I felt like Jordan was just kind of like poking fun and having some fun and having a laugh, I guess. But then I've seen interviews where I realized that he, like, actively is not doing that. I think he really did think that he wove this pretty perfect tapestry together, and that everyone has to get all the Easter eggs together to fully get his themes and stuff. But I don't think he did. And I think that this is a movie that you shouldn't pick apart too deeply, because then it doesn't work as well. And I don't mean purely from a logical standpoint, like, oh, you know, there's this plot hole, or how do they do this, or how did this come together. I just mean that the ideas don't all coalesce the way that I think maybe he thought they would. And that's all right. I mean, this is a more ambitious undertaking. It's definitely broader and has more threads than Get Out. I don't need them all to come together for it to be a satisfying experience. I'm happy that they're there. I'm happy that he's even hinting at these things and talking about this class consciousness type issue and stuff. And I think it's fine. I think it's pretty cool. I just don't like the notion that if I don't go and spend hours on Reddit with a bunch of other obsessive weirdos, then I'm not going to fully get the movie. I sort of think that if you make a film that requires that, then, like, you did something wrong. Like, a story should hold together well on its own, and then it should be more rewarding the more you watch it, definitely. One of my favorite films of all time is Christopher Nolan's The Prestige, and that's a movie I've seen like 30 or 40 times, and every time I watch it, I like it a little more. It never falls apart to me. There's always new little details that I notice or whatever that make it feel like a richer whole. I've seen Us twice already. I kind of want to see it a third, but I really don't think it'll survive a fourth viewing. I can just feel already that the more I watch it, the more things I'm going to find that I don't like as much, or that don't work, than the opposite. And that's, not great. I think people, if they really want to get the most that they can out of Us, they should watch it once, maybe twice, and just, have fun with it. But I just don't think it's a film that's going to hold up well to scrutiny over time. And since you guys asked for it, people on Twitter mostly, they wanted to know what my dumb, wrong-headed ending of the movie was. So I'm just going to do that. Spoilers, obviously, if you haven't seen Us, I'm not going to go out of my way to explain why I had this ending, but this is the ending that I thought happened both times that I watched the movie. Spoilers. Okay, so I'm going to first explain the two things in the movie that led me to read the ending the way that I did. Thing one is that early on in the film, when Red, Lupita Nyong'o's Adelaide character's doppelganger, when Red is giving her throaty speech at the beginning, she mentioned something about how God was testing her. That was kind of a throwaway line, I guess. And I was like, okay, that's just what people who lose their minds think, right? But then later, in the third act, when she's explaining the history of the Tethered, the specific thing she says that got me was, they created a way to clone the body, but not the spirit, not the mind, the soul, so to speak. So it's two bodies sharing one spirit, one soul. That stuck with me. And I don't know what other thing I've read or seen that had a similar concept. I've been racking my brain for days to figure it out, but whatever. That idea burrowed in my mind. And I thought that meant that there was some sort of literal connection between the people and their doppelgangers. So when the big fight happens, which is just sort of a spookier, less ethereal version of the ending of Annihilation or whatever, there's a moment when the moment when Adelaide kills Red, when she actually fully snaps her neck and stuff. The way Lupita played that moment to me, she gets immediately ecstatic. You know what I mean? She's just ah, and then she knows exactly where the key on her neck is and undoes her stuff. The way I read that moment is that Red, the evil doppelganger, that her plan all along was to get killed by Adelaide. That the entire movie she had been pushing her in the direction of being corrupted, of testing her until she broke. And by broke, I mean killed her. Because there's the other images throughout the film where Adelaide gets really violent and she almost seems like an entirely different person, and her son sees it, and it's very, So that's what I thought happened. I'm oh, her plan was to get Adelaide to kill her, and then by making her kill her, her spirit has then moved into Adelaide's body. That is what I thought happened. That's just, I wasn't thinking this, I wasn't forcing this, it's just, that's how I naturally read the situation. I was oh, okay, cool. So now she takes her spirit, that's her body, that's crazy. Okay. And then when she goes and gets her son out of the locker, it seemed to me he could tell, that this wasn't his mom. Even though it looks like his mom, it's not her. I was okay, cool, spooky, I'm into it. Then, when they had the full real reveal that Adelaide and Red had actually switched as children, that is when I thought, oh, okay, so Adelaide has now grown up her entire life under here with the crazy tethered people, and that she concocted this plan with all of them, but her real plan was to get her body, to get her old life back. So I thought that that's what it was. I thought Adelaide as Red convinced Red as Adelaide to kill her, and then that her soul, remember there's one soul in these two clone husks, went into her body, and now this is the original Adelaide back in her doppelganger's body with her family that she should have had the whole time, and then only her son knows something is up. So to me, the ending read hopeful. I was oh, she did a lot of really bad things because she grew up in this terrible way, and then she did what she had to do to get her rightful life back. I guess that's cool. There's stuff you could pick from that. But that is clearly wrong. No one else I know said that that's how they read the movie, And that's because the whole thing about the soul switching is not supported anywhere else in the text. There's nothing about the movie that suggests that that's a real thing. That's just how I read it, probably because I read too many comics and watch too many genre things where stuff like that does happen with that explanation, and it just made sense to me, and I'm wrong. I've had a few people I've told think that this is a better ending. Most people have looked at me and been like, "Are you dumb? What is wrong with you?" But that's end of spoilers. That's how I read the movie. Now that I know that wasn't the ending of the movie, I kind of like the ending less. And this, to me, is the first ever example that this happened to me, where the larger world of, like, you know, picking a movie apart and fan theories and stuff has actually made me like a movie less. This stuff is designed to get you more engrossed in the picture, make you see things you never thought before. And now I'm like, oh, actually, now I dig the ending less than I did when I had interpreted my own thing, you know? I kind of wish I had just not engaged with the discourse at all. That's my take on Us. I think it's a really good movie. I liked it a lot. I don't know if I want to watch it a third time. I don't know if I should encourage any of you to watch it a third time. I do definitely think you should see it because it's really good. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of think pieces about the film and things like that in the next coming weeks because that's just what happens. That's sort of the world we live in now, you know? Avengers Infinity War came out nearly a year ago, and every other day since then there's been theories about how Endgame is going to go. There's this cottage industry that's designed to keep movies alive in the national consciousness, and it's just not going away anytime soon. So I think maybe the key thing here is that if you're going to engage in this kind of discourse, you're going to pick movies apart, and you're going to look for deeper meaning and stuff, do it with like a grain of salt. You know what I mean? Like, don't go looking for some special cardinal reading of the movie that's basically like a math problem that only has one answer. It's a movie. If it's open-ended, there can be different interpretations of it. Obviously, it's important to understand what the author intended, but it's not always important. It's not the end-all, be-all. You know, it's about what you personally get out of it. Don't, you know, get trapped into thinking that there's something deeper, and if you don't understand it, then you're an idiot, and if you do understand it, that you're special. That's the wrong way, in my opinion, to do this. Obviously, you can't tell people how to like something, but I think that way is reductive and weird and bad. That's it. That's me on Us. I think it's a dope movie, and yeah. So thank you guys for your patience with this video. Check back in a few days on Thursday when I upload the next video, which was supposed to be the last video about a very different subject than Us. And yeah, and if you guys think that if you guys think that the ending of Us that I accidentally made in my head is stupid, please say so below in the comments. Feel free to hit me up on Twitter and call me names. Thank you, and have a great week.